So what I'll be doing is taking you through a little history of the Soviet space program and a little bit about cover-ups of some of the fatalities and some of the launches. And then at the end, I will show you the installation. And I'm also in the space, so after this is over, I will turn this around and you can actually see the installation. You'll have a nicer view than this, lovely background that I have right now. It looks like I'm in a bunker, so it's actually good. Anyways, so I think we're ready. And if anybody, does anybody have any questions before we start? Okay. Ludmila, the life of a lost cosmonaut. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union was intense. Both sides built and tested rockets as quickly as they could, trying to be the first to launch an artificial satellite into orbit, often with explosive results. People around the world watched and listened. Two amateur radio operators, Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia, were the most successful. They bought surplus war equipment by weight and reassembled it with an electrician friend. And their mother found out about it, that the military was selling equipment, and it was $5 a pound, and she bought 300 pounds. So she was very supportive. They focused on the Soviet airwaves because they were closer and were more secretive and recorded in an old World War II bunker that they called Coral Burt. They were able to distinguish frequencies from 6 different Soviet tracking stations. 15 space enthusiasts joined them. Giovanni's fiancée, Laura, organized a group of radio enthusiasts from around the world, including Angola, Tahiti, and Argentina. The group was called Zeus Amateur Network and had 17 stations. They would track at the same time when Soviet ground stations became active. 2 people monitored voices and signals and made tape recordings. 2 worked the dish antenna, and 1 operated a calculator to determine speed and orbital path. They heard an announcement that the Soviet Union was launching their first satellite, and the Soviet Union broadcasted their radio frequency. So they tried it, and they heard Sputnik. They had a reel-to-reel and connected it to the receiver and recorded it. But there was so much secrecy that they really weren't sure that this was really out in space. So what they did is measure the Doppler effect, and that is a way that sound waves vary depending on where the listener is. So the best way I can explain it is if you hear, for example, a siren coming towards you, it gets very, very loud, and then as soon as it passes by you, it drops, the frequency drops and it changes. So this is how they measured where they were with the Doppler effect. So they were very excited to be able to have recorded this sound. And so they started to comb the airways to hear and something else. And but a month later, they heard Sputnik 2. And they heard a thumping sound, and they thought it sounds like a heartbeat, but it was a lot faster than a human heart. And one of them thought, I wonder, it sounds more like a dog's heart. And that their father, who was a doctor, listened to it and he said he agreed. And they finally showed or played it for a vet who said, yes, it's a dog's heart. They soon found out that Laika was sent out into space, and she was able to survive for a couple of hours. On November 28th, I heard an SOS Morse code, and this cry for help was getting softer and going very fast and moving away from Earth at an escape speed. Amateurs in Germany and Texas picked up the same message. 3 days later, Moscow mentioned a failed launch, but they did not say that it was manned. I was listening to a podcast by Giovanni, who's now in his 80s, he's still alive. And he said that he believed that maybe for some reason they thought the Americans could have heard them and maybe they would help them. But, you know, they really were lost out there just sending their Morse code. In February, they recorded a shortness of breath and then a heartbeat. One of the brothers was a medical student and his professor, a cardiac surgeon, came to listen. He said it was a breath hungry for air. The second recording was a heartbeat of a dying man. But the sounds faded quickly, indicating they were moving away from Earth. The Soviets announced that they had launched a vehicle in space, but it was now heading to Venus. They didn't mention anything about it anyone being on board. Oops, sorry. Vladimir Ilyushin was a Soviet general and test pilot and the son of aerospace engineer Sergei Ilyushin. He spent most of his career as a test pilot and would have been a top pick to be the first official man in space. According to recently declassified documents, Ilyushin was placed in a capsule called Rossiya, and the secret flight took place in the early hours of the morning on Friday, April 17, 1961. After a guidance malfunction, the cosmonaut is reported to have made an unguided crash landing in China, too critically injured to announce the mission a complete success, and he remained in China for a year while he recovered. The brothers also reported a vehicle or ship of some sort that orbited the Earth 3 times that day. On April 12, 1961, the Soviets announced they launched a man into space, Yuri Gagarin. The brothers followed him as he flew over Africa and recorded his transmissions. They contacted an Italian news agency, and it was broadcast throughout Italy. And they looked to have it transcribed, but what they found is that every interpretation was different. So this will be important later. They asked their sister if she'd be willing to learn Russian so that she could interpret these, and she did. So she would translate them, and then anything would go to an actual professional translator who would, you know, iron out the details. Sorry. On October 14, 1961, the brothers reported a distress call. In some accounts, the flight carried 2 men and a woman. It was picked up in Alaska and Sweden as well. So here in the podcast I mentioned, Giovanna recalls what they said through an interpreter.
It's growing worse. Why don't you answer? We are going slower. The world will never know about us.
So here's a list of alleged lost cosmonauts. Some of this is gleaned from a list by a Czech communist who's high ranking, and he supposedly had the list of all of these unofficial space shots. What I found really interesting when I put together this list is I was working from a lot of different sources, and all of them were incomplete. And some of them, for example, would list a flight at that time, but they didn't know who was on that flight, or they would have a list of somebody who had died, but they didn't have that listed as part of a flight, but the day that they died, but then that would coordinate with a flight. So this is a list that I've put together from several sources, and you can always look at it later. I'm not going to read it all because it's far too much, but you will see that it does follow the sequence that we've been discussing, but there are more that I don't really have time to go into right now. So the Russians always presented their march to space as a smooth road to glory and the outgrowth of sound planning and monolithic support. And so they would practice their boasting, and then they would cover up, and then they would lie, and then they would retouch their own history. And that became very suspect. And you'll see here in the next three slides that they literally just airbrushed people out of the image if something happened to them, if they, or perhaps if they died in a crash. The most notorious photo Dr. set was the one showing the so-called Sochi 6. And 70 years later, British researcher Rex Hall found two different versions of yet another group picture from that same day. One had all 16 and the other one only had 11. Oops. Sorry. In 1960, the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein wrote in his article, Pravda Means Truth, that on May 15, 1960, while traveling in the Soviet Lithuania, he was told by Red Army cadets that the Soviet Union had launched a human into orbit that day. But later on, it was denied by officials. Heinlein speculated that the rocket was an orbital launch, later said to be uncrewed, and that retro rockets had fired in the wrong direction, making recovery efforts unsuccessful. So 60 years ago today, the brothers reported this infamous female cosmonaut who was trying to re-enter. Later on, she was called Ludmila, but we really don't know who she is. And this is the transcribed recording. Three days later, the Soviets announced that there was a crash the size of a bus. They didn't mention anything about a cosmonaut being on board. So who was Ludmila? So what I want to do now is I just want to piece together her life and to restore her humanity and talk about who she may have been, just referencing the culture of that time. So was she a happy baby? Did she have a favorite toy? Was she wealthy? Was she middle class? Was she poor? Did she live in the country? Did she live in a city? Did she have a brother? Or perhaps a sister? Did she go to a good school? Did she have parties when she was little? Did she have best friend? You know, during the Revolutionary War, there was a large number of soldiers who had to leave to go to war, and that left a lot of industrial work, factory work to women. And so there are hundreds of thousands of women who ended up going to work, and the fathers were not home at all. So what was interesting is it left the homemaking to the grandmothers, and they would do all the housework and raise the children, but they also taught them traditional values. And during this time, motherhood was celebrated as patriotic, and the joys of family and children was extolled by the country's leaders. So perhaps she was brought up by her grandmother, and she just saw her mother in the evenings. Perhaps she only saw her father on occasion. Communal apartments, communalka, grew in Russia and the Soviet Union as a response to housing crises in urban areas. Between 2 and 7 families typically shared a communal apartment. Each family had its own room, which often served as a living room, dining room, and bedroom for the entire family. All the residents of the entire apartment shared the use of the hallways, kitchen, and bathroom, and a telephone if one was available. So perhaps she was brought up in Moscow, and she lived in one of these community homes. That would have meant that her family, I would assume, would be very close, and they would be completely dependent on each other. I also wondered if she could have possibly been a night witch. And that would have put her in her early 30s when she would have flown that mission, which was not unusual. A lot of the cosmonauts are very young, in their 20s, but someone like Vladimir Komarov flew when he was 40, so it is possible. So the night witches were the 588th highly decorated female unit, and they flew 30,000 missions over the course of 4 years. They ranged in age from 17 to 26 and flew primarily at night, making do with crop dusters that were made of plywood and canvas, using only maps and compasses. They didn't even have parachutes because they were too heavy. And they often operated in stealth mode, idling their engines as they neared their targets and then gliding their way to their bomb targets. As a result, their planes made swishing noises like a witch's broomstick as they flew by. Hence, that's how they received that name from the Germans. Every night, the night witches would cruise to their target, then shut off the engine and make a silent dive. They flew in pairs and they released the bombs, sometimes climbing out on the wing to release a sticky trigger and restart the engine as they pulled away. And these night witches made up 18 of these missions a night. So these women were quite courageous. And so I could see Ludmila being one of them and having the courage to go into space. So the first manned spacecraft, Vostok, would be automatically controlled from the ground, and the cosmonauts took good care of monitoring systems inside the capsule. But the search for Soviet candidates was relatively easy. And it basically was found in the rank of jet pilots in the Air Force. They did not need to be engineers like the astronauts at the time, but they did need to be test pilots and have flying experience. But they definitely would need to be sound parachutists, because at the time they had not created a satisfactory rocket landing system, and they were not close to water. And so as a consequence, they would be automatically ejected from the craft as they neared the ground. So that's what happened with Aleutian, was that they think that he damaged his legs, he had severe damage to his legs in China because of his landing. So I'm now going to show you the exhibition, the installation, and what I hope to achieve with this was to give a voice to Ludmila's life before she passed in the way that she did. to give her back her humanity and to take you through the veils of memory. So that's Ludmila. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. First of all, everybody knows I'm from the Soviet Union. So I'd like to say it's ninth installation, but an absolutely fake story. First of all, let's start from the beginning. Why the Soviet Union could hide the first cosmonauts in space? They would, if they would send somebody in 1960 or in 1957, they will say to all world. For example, on Yuri Gagarin, it was the first man in space, and he went on April 12, 1961. And then in 23 days, the American astronaut went to space. So the Soviet Union was the first. And they could not risk these 23 days. If they could, they start earlier. And at that day, April 21st, 12th, 1961, all the Soviet Union radio station had 3 messages to say. First message, Yuri Gagarin went and came safely, and we heard it. Second message, something wrong happened at the start. And third message, Yuri Gagarin went to space and died over there. But anyway, the Soviet Union would be first country in the world, and Yuri Gagarin would be first man in the space. That is so it was not any lost cosmonaut. Yuri Gagarin was truly first. Second, about this Ludmila. It's just 2 weeks after this. I cannot even describe what is how all the Soviet people look at this event. Just Yuri Gagarin went and returned safely. Then, everybody knows about this. Then 2 weeks later, they sent Ludmila to cosmos. But it was not true, first of all. And second, we heard the voice. I'd like to stress all Soviet cosmonauts were highly educated and very intelligent people, and all of them were native Russian speakers. That Ludmila is not native Russian speakers, and she was not trained because, for example, Gagarin had a nickname Kedar, and when he was in space, he said, "I'm Kedar. Kedar is a Siberian pine tree. I'm Kedar. Do you copy? Over." Which means in Russian it's supposed to be прием, прием, but nobody will say, говорите, talk to me. Why highly educated military person will say, talk to me, talk to me? And she is not Russian, not native Russian speaker. So it's not true.
Thank you so much, Marina, for that. That you've added so much to the talk. I'm so happy that you've joined us. I did want to say, and I did not say at the beginning, that this is a conspiracy theory. So that this is information that I've gathered from many sources, and there's a lot of people that voice the same thing as you. They say that this was, and this is why I wanted to mention about the sister learning Russian. A lot of people think that she actually did the reporting, and that this person did not exist. And so it was interesting, though, when I started doing more and more research in this, it was interesting how many different names came up. And I think that part of it is suspect because cosmonauts were airbrushed out of images. And so that sets the stage for a conspiracy. But there are a lot of people like yourself, Marina, who also or confirm that this is not.
But it was such an honor to be in the cosmonaut team. And if some person did something wrong, like abused his wife or did another bad thing, this person has been erased from everything, from the photos, from the records, but not died in the space.
Well, there was one who, and I don't have his name written down, unfortunately, but he was in a terrible accident where he was training and the capsule he was in set on fire. And it took a full hour before they could get him out just because of the pressure, and he, died a terrible death. But he was taking out the images, but true, there were other cosmonauts who, there was one in the first image I showed who supposedly was an alcoholic and got into fights, and they thought, okay, we don't want him on the team. So I really appreciate your point of view, Marina. I'm so thrilled that I have someone from the Soviet Union here to discuss that side of it, and that adds so much to the conversation. So thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Hi, Susan. I think you're muted, Susan.
Okay, I'm on there. Okay.
Super.
Yeah, so I really, getting back to just the art installation aspect of your presentation, I think what I really see here is you've kind of expanded what we can do with particularly the Ruth Upjohn Gallery. I think you've sort of taken it into a film thing as opposed to just an installation thing. And that's really useful, I think, for us all to sort of see how you did that. I mean, I don't say we all have to become filmmakers, but I'm just saying how Heather has used a video camera and used the room that Ruth Upjohn is kind of a scene set to create a story. So I really appreciate that. There's a lot to unpack there, which I can't do, but I'm going to enjoy looking at a recording of this of your show, and when I finally get to see it, I'll do that too. But I'm just saying there's a really interesting aspect there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. I just wanted to respond to that. So you can't see me now because I'm in the installation, and this is like an alcove in the gallery space, and of course I projected on this one wall. And so it did lend itself well to working with layers. And when I initially thought of doing this, I was just going to recreate her room and just, and then maybe do some paintings of her from the images that I'd found. And I felt like working with fabric, which is something that I don't normally work in, kind of gave that diaphanous feel of memory. And working with video as well added to it. So it was a really exciting way for me to work, and I loved doing it. So I really would like to work this way again.
Okay, great.
Some questions? Sorry, so Kate, how did I choose the images? So what I did is I basically just did some research into the Soviet Union of that time period and just picked up some images and tried to find pictures that looked like they could be related. And some of them I did find on eBay. I don't know if you saw in the video, there were some pins, and those are actual cosmonaut pins from the Soviet Union, and those were dated back at the time. There's one there's a Vostok 1 pin, and I got this from the Czech Republic. So they were also selling photographs from family members from the Soviet Union. So a lot of those I got from there as well. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or want to talk about the installation or any questions?
Yes, I just wanted to say that this is so fascinating what you have done, taking this very ephemeral notion and researching it to such a degree, and coming up with this imaginary person, whether or not she existed or didn't exist, I still find the whole concept totally fascinating.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun. And I was so appreciate what Marina said, that, you know, that to remember that she may not have existed, and that, you know, this is not an absolute truth, but creating a narrative from just a sound, like that's like that little video I saw on a podcast, and just, you know, a story from it. But I think in a lot of ways, this sort of speaks to anybody who doesn't have a voice. And I always like to try to bring humanity to anyone. So maybe, you know, she may not have existed, but there could have been. I mean, there was one explosion in the Soviet Union where 90 people died. I mean, there were people who died in the Challenger. You know, there have been accidents in both space programs, in the Soviet and the American space program, and I think all these people are individuals with stories. So giving them the humanity is important.
Mhm. You know, if I can continue, it makes me think about something. I have a photograph of a cousin of my late mother's who lived in Eastern Europe, somewhere in Poland, and he and his family perished during the Holocaust. And all I have of him, I don't know anything about him, all I have is a photograph of him, some fragments of a letter that he wrote, and also a photograph of my mother and my father from the 1930s. And on the back of it, my mother wrote that she meant to send it to him, to my dear cousin, and I can't even make out the name, from, you know, Celia and Art in America, because all Canada and US was considered America. And I've often thought, what can I do with these things, you know? And you've given me a wonderful idea to try to piece together something about this person, because for all I know, these things that I have may be all that's left of him and his family. There may be no other trace anywhere else. So it's kind of precious, and I really feel like I should do something with it. So you've inspired me.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You don't have very much to work with, and then you really do have to extrapolate, and you have to create, you know, a story, and which may or may not be true. I mean, obviously, I would never know how true it would be, but it is kind of interesting. Now, I did have a question about why I used fabric, and I just wanted. I like the idea of layering. I've always used layering in my work, and so there's a layering of these stories, a layering of her life, and I thought that was a way of showing how memory. You can move from one memory to the next. So you might be thinking about when you were a child, and then thinking about when you learned how to parachute, or whatever it was in her life. So how they kind of blended together, and they are. Is an ethereal quality, and also there's an imaginary quality of it as well. But it's not real, but it has this essence of being something that could be real. I'm just looking here. Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, Michael made an interesting comment. He said, a wonderful and fascinating narrative you have brought to life with the contest of questions of what's true and not true. And I do think that that's, you know, an important part of this is that, you know, we often create narratives as well for ourselves and for other people, and some of it isn't true or it's been exaggerated. So yes, it's really, really interesting. Does anybody have any other questions? I can kind of show the face here.
There's Denise and Alia here, so like,
Oh, hi.
hi. We just appreciate, how you we view the story. It's a beautiful story how you told it, and just I think as an artist, so you made us also curious about reading more about this and seeing more. That was a beautiful installation.
Yeah, for sure. It was just really
Thank you.
amazing and beautiful how you brought her to life. Like, I definitely know that I'm gonna do some more looking into who she was. Because it was very inspiring and emotional.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really important, I think, to use the appropriate medium, or not appropriate, but something that excites you and tells a story. And there also was, for me, when I heard this recording for the first time, it really haunted me. It couldn't leave me. And I thought about her being in this, this enclosed space, and whether or not it was true. There were cosmonauts and astronauts who were in these capsules and in these small spaces. And I mean, Komarov, for example, was a cosmonaut in 1963 crash. So how did he feel? Like, when he knew he was gonna crash, he was very angry and he was raging. And I think, how did he feel when he saw this happening? So I wanted to kind of encapsulate as well that sense of being enclosed and then also being set free. I was wondering how many of you are going to start looking up Soviet and American space. A lot of this came from Expedition of Fantastical, my last show, where I was researching more of the American, NASA's space program, but then I just got caught in going down that rabbit hole of vintage space programs. Do we have any more questions or comments, or you want to see anything? Or
Heather, I just want to, if you don't mind, I'd love to show you a picture Marina just sent to me.
okay.
Okay, so this is, hold on a second. Everybody see that?
Oh wow.
That's Marina.
Oh wow, that's fantastic.
Oh, right?
Marina
So-
Antonov?
Yeah, no, Bushia, she's our accountant.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
okay.
fantastic.
Yeah, I know. So she's, she's from the Soviet Union, and she's the one that made the comments at the beginning.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll stop the share now.
Wow.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Marina has added a lot to this conversation. I really appreciate it. Exciting to have somebody from that time period. Okay. Oh, so what? So I have a question about the textiles. This material culture have always been associated. I think it worked very well with Ludmila story. Yeah, that's interesting. The idea of using textiles as kind of a female art. I think there was something to it in terms of just creating it, the intimacy of making it. I had originally brought my sewing machine into my studio, and I ended up hand stitching all of these images, and in a lot of ways leaving the edges kind of frayed, and hand stitching these in my studio kind of created a more of an intimacy in the story and the relationship with the story. So I don't know. I don't know about attaching gender to a certain medium, but I certainly do think that people like Joyce Weiland brought textiles to the fore in use of in art as art materials. But I just see it now as another medium I can work with. I'll just say another comment here. I just want to say, yeah, shout out to my new camera too.
Ah, I see.
I bought myself a Canon M50, if anyone wants to know, because I'm going to be going to the Arctic for residency next year, and I needed a camera that could do double duty as shooting stills and video. And to me, it really did so much of the heavy lifting for me shooting this. I think the quality of the video is excellent, and it's just this tiny handheld camera. I think that's exciting for me too, because I have shot some video, but I would not say I'm anyway call myself a videographer, but I'm starting to become much more comfortable with it, and I think this camera is my new favorite toy. So I think I'm going to be probably working with it a lot more.
For sure.
So it's 1 o'clock. I guess that is the end. I was just going to say that I will be, this is posting. I will be posting this to Facebook, and it's actually on my website now, if you want to see it again, without the glitches of sound. It's a Canon M50. So you can see it again if you want by going to my website, and probably the sound will be a little better. Okay, so, thank you, Cal. Cal says she's going to post it as well. I really appreciate all of you coming out today to explore the history of the program, to listen to the words of somebody who may or may not have existed, but to join me in my world, my ethereal world of Ludmila, and anybody else who does not have a voice. So thank you.